Yeah. So they wanted to open Chinese market. So they sent their own products to China in 18th century and 19th century, including opium by British. So according to the number, in 19th century, which was the late Qing dynasty, our last dynasty, in average, among each 10 persons, there was one person who addicted to opium. So that was a very big social problem for China. So the military, the army was weaker and weaker, and there was such a lot of corruption in the Qing dynasty. So the whole dynasty was almost collapsed, was going to collapse. And then there was one governor from Canton province. He decided to fight back with the British, and he decided that we have to forbid the opiums from British. So he took all the opium from Canton province and he burned it. So that was the leading reason that British started the war against China. That was because it was the excuse was the opium. So that war was named the First Opium War, and China lost the war easily. And then 2 years later, they started again. So that was called the Second World War, and China lost it again. So in those two wars, China both failed. So the whole Europe, it was like they awoke. They thought China was a tiger, but that tiger was sleeping. But the whole Europe awoke like the lions. So more and more Europeans, they started coming to China, to invade China. So they took Shanghai, they took Tianjin, they took Canton, and finally they took Hong Kong. So that was the history in the late Qing dynasty, in the late 19th century. So till then, China realized that we had to develop technology also. Otherwise, we couldn't defeat the Europeans. Actually, China had the gunpowder from Song dynasty 800 years ago. But we used the gunpowder for firework. So in the Qing dynasty, when British attacked China, they were using the cannon. And in the cannon, the gunpowder was from China. And we didn't know how to fight back. We didn't know how to defeat, by the gunpowder. That's very sad. And we had the very good technology for building the ships since Ming dynasty 500 years ago. But we didn't build up the navy. There was no navy. So till late 19th century, finally China realized that was the biggest problem in our country, was that we didn't have a strong army for a navy and good technology for cannons. So that's why in late Qing dynasty, the government, the Qing emperors, they sent some Chinese students abroad to UK, to Japan, for learning new technology and for new education. And also they sent some people to learn English in different countries, and also to German. So those students, when they came back, they built up the first railway in China. So in UK, they had the railway system for 1,000 miles. But in China, the first railway was only like 20 kilometers. So that was the big difference. Yeah. So China and India, these Asian countries, we stopped developing for thousands of years. So our lifestyle, if you check the history book and all the pictures of the lifestyle in China, from 2,000 years ago, we already had the carriage, which were took by the horses, running by the horses. And then 200 years ago, still run by the horses, the carriage. There was no change. So we had the very good civilization, but in the past. So there was no big change and no new development. And everything had two sides, the good side and the bad side. The British, the Europeans, they attacked China. Of course, for Chinese, it was a disaster. But if without the attack from the Europeans, China might be a sleeping tiger for even longer. Right. So, finally in 1912, we had those people who were sent abroad to Japan, those young students, young people who went to Japan in late 19th century. After studying in Japan and in Europe, they realized and they have learned what was the meaning of democracy and freedom. So those people coming back to China and they built up a new system which was for democracy, for freedom, and they said no more feudal system. So they had to stop the feudal system because that was the history happening in the whole world, that they were taking down the feudal systems and to build up the country of the democracy. So in the late 19th century and early 20th century, all those people, their biggest dream was to build up a country of democracy, and they made it. So the Chinese feudal system, the dynasty, was finished in 1911. So the last emperor, he was not killed. It was like, okay, these young people, they built up a new system and they got more and more support. They became stronger and stronger. But on the other hand, the emperor was becoming weaker and weaker, and they lost most of the support. And since they had very big burden of the economy, because they had a lot of debt, because they lost the war against the British and Europeans, so the government had to pay a lot of money to British and to different countries. So the central government, the emperor, they owned a lot of debt to the Europeans. So they had actually lost all their real power. But the Democracy Party, they were stronger. So finally, the Democracy Party said, okay, the emperor, now you have to be retired, and we take the power. But of course, we won't kill you. You can still live in the Forbidden City. But you lose your real power from now on. So this is how the change happened. So those young people, they built up a country which was called the Republic of China. So that was the name of the country, the Republic of China. And then meanwhile, the emperor, the little boy who was living in the Forbidden City. I don't know, have you heard about the story of the last emperor in Beijing or not when you visited the Forbidden City? Yeah. So it was totally a tragic life for the little emperor. And then the Republic of China was started from 1912, and then till 1949, this period, China was still suffering because we had the change from the feudal system to the modern system. And in the year of when we just finished all the wars against the Europeans, they still lived in Shanghai, like along the bund. When you go to Shanghai, you will see they left so many architectures in Shanghai. And then those people, when we were still dealing with the Europeans in a very difficult way, another enemy came. The Second World War started, which was Japan. So Japan invaded China since 1938, and it lasted for 8 years, till 1945. So the Republic of China, actually, it was a history of suffering. And then till 1945, finally we defeated the Japanese. But there were two parties in China by then. First party was led by the Republic of China, by Chiang Kai-shek. And then another party who was led by Chairman Mao. So Chairman Mao was the leader of the communist system. He was a follower of the Soviet Union. So during the Second World War, Mao, he got more and more support. But actually, Mao's army was illegal because the official party in China was led by Chiang Kai-shek. So Chiang Kai-shek, he didn't like Chairman Mao to be so powerful. So they were all in conflicts. But during the Second World War, they had to fight together against the Japanese. So when the Chinese and Japanese war finished, these two parties started to fight with each other for 4 years. So we had 8 years Chinese and Japanese Second World War, and then another 4 years of the Civil War till 1949. And then Chairman Mao defeated Chiang Kai-shek. So Chiang Kai-shek moved to Taiwan. So that's why today Taiwanese, they still consider that Taiwan is an isolated and independent country, but China thinks Taiwan is part of China. Yeah.